to the Edie J. Adler Show, only on LA Talk Radio.
Shalom, amigos. I am Edie J. Adler. Thank you for tuning in to the Edie J. Adler Show. Every week I say the same thing. The show is welcome and open to everyone as long as we keep it civil. No name calling, no insulting. And we're going to do things a little bit different this time because I'm dedicating the show to Israel. So we're going to start with the dog. As you know, if you've seen the show or listened to the show, every week I featured a pet who needs to find a forever home, a loving family. All animals deserve to have a loving family. Well, this week I'm talking about two dogs, and let me tell you a little bit about them. Shunder is 6 years old, and Sarah is 7 years old. They were surrendered to the East Valley Animal Shelter in Van Nuys, California, because neighbors made noise complaints about them. That's a very nice excuse. The dogs had been with the quote-unquote family since they were puppies. You know, it would take a lot more than complaining neighbors for me. Actually, it would take an act of God for me to get rid of my animals. I would rather move than leave them. But I digress. Both dogs are precious and easygoing, and they rely on each other. Shunder weighs 132 pounds. We don't know whether he's obese from overeating or from some medical condition, but he gets around well. He is street motivated and enjoys getting petted and brushed. Sarah is 68 pounds. She is vision impaired, but she manages to get around well. She also enjoys getting petted and brushed. If you go to their kennel, you'll probably find them cuddling together. Oh, yes, they're large dogs, but they won't need a lot of activity. A couple of daily walks around the neighborhood and pillows to lay on while you're enjoying streaming on TV, reading a book, or watching the Edie J. Adler Show. Please, don't separate them. They've been together their whole lives. They're used to each other, so they need a home that welcomes both of them. If you separate them, their hearts will break. Have pity on them. Just go take a look at them at the East Valley Animal Shelter located at 14409 Van Owen Street in Van Nuys, California. And you know what? If you find that maybe these dogs are not for you, can't imagine why, but if that's the case, I'm sure you will find a pet to keep you company and give you lots of love. They have cats, bunnies, turtles, birds. But let's find a nice home for these two dogs, please, and let's keep them together. Like the song says, love will keep us together. So let's keep these dogs together in the name of Captain Antonio. Anyway, now let's talk about the show. Like I said at the beginning, this show is dedicated to Israel. We are smack in the middle of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In case you've been living under a rock and you don't know, Rosh Hashanah is what people refer to as the Jewish New Year. Yom Kippur is known as the Day of Atonement. And people think of it as Jewish holidays. But they're really holidays for everyone. Rosh Hashanah celebrates the creation, the universe, the creation of the earth, the creation of everything that is visible and invisible. So it applies to everyone, Jews and non-Jews. And in between these days, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, people are supposed to think about their previous year and their life and what they have done, what they could do better. If you have hurt someone, you're supposed to go and ask for forgiveness. You're supposed to try and fix that transgression. Try to make the person feel better. Try to make them whole again. And the person hopefully will forgive you. So it applies to everyone, not just Jewish people. And also, we believe that God decides in this period of 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur who gets written in the book of life and who gets to go to the other side and face the music. Well, this year marks 1 year since the massacre in Israel, the horrible, horrendous terrorist attack launched on Israel. 367 days since we have people being kidnapped, tortured, murdered. And there are still 101 hostages in captivity. Whether they're alive or not, their family, they deserve to come home. 12 Americans were taken. At least one American was murdered already. So this year, these days, the world has a lot to ask forgiveness for. I am grateful for the blessings that I get every day from God. I am grateful that I had the amazing parents that God gave me, the wonderful family, my brother, my sisters, nephews, nieces, cousins, uncles and aunts, my husband, my friends, every single animal that has come into my life. I am grateful for that. And I thank God every single day. But I am also very, very angry and disappointed at the world. You should be all of those people protesting and demonstrating against Israel, calling for the annihilation of every Jew, for the destruction of a tiny country called Israel. You should be down on your knees begging for forgiveness and asking God to open up your eyes and your heart to see the truth. Because the truth is that Israel is saving you. Don't you understand that Israel and the Jewish people are the only thing standing between you and the terrorists who want to murder you? Whether you're Jewish or not, to them, you're an infidel. If you're gay and you're demonstrating for Jews, against Jews, and calling for the liberation of Gaza from the river to the sea, why don't you try walking in Gaza, any Arab country, with your partner and see how long you last? They will throw you from a rooftop, but not before they torture you. Shame on you. Shame on you, world. Shame on you. In my wildest dreams, I never, ever, ever imagined that I would see the anti-Semitism in the world that I see now. When my parents decided to leave a very successful business in Mexico to move here because my father loved this country. He loved Mexico too. And he loved Israel. And he still does, because love doesn't die. We moved here so that I would have a better life. I had a pretty good life in Mexico, by the way. I was still a little girl, but I had it pretty good. My father was successful, and I wanted for nothing. But the corruption that my dad saw made him think that this would be a better place. I'm sure his soul is aching, watching what's going on in the universities, in the colleges, in the schools, people calling for the destruction of Israel. Of all the world, of all the countries in the world, the one tiny little space that we have, we have always had. It's not about land, people. Wake up. They have been offered their own state 5 times. 5 times. And 5 times they have refused. Why? Because it's not about land. It's about destroying the Jewish state and its people, wherever we may be. And I know why. I learned this from my friend Dennis Prager, and it made a lot of sense to me. The Jewish people were chosen not because we were special or better than anybody else. We were chosen to bring God into the world. Because back then there were multiple gods. And to bring order into the world with his 10 commandments. We brought rules. We brought a judge that will judge you, whether you're good or bad. And the world has never forgiven us for that. And you know what? I'm beginning to think that maybe we are a little bit better. Not all of us. But we don't want to kill people. It hurts our soul to be fighting a war. Our soldiers in Israel have to have counseling because they don't like to kill people. They go out of their way to protect innocent lives, unlike the beasts that came into our tiny little land on October 7th last year, murdering, torturing, mutilating babies, women, men, children, the elderly. They weren't happy just killing them. They had to torture and mutilate them and burn them alive. Yes, I am angry. I'm sad, deeply, deeply sad and angry at the world. And you know what? I am officially endorsing Donald Trump right now. Not that he needs my endorsement, but I'm voting for him. You know why? Because he's the best friend Israel has ever had as far as presidents go. And Mr. President Trump, if you ever get to see this, on behalf of my people, I apologize to you for treating you so poorly, for being so ungrateful to you, and calling you names that you do not deserve. Thank you, sir, for your support and your love of our land. And if you want to unfriend me on Facebook, if you want to not follow me anymore or turn away from this little show, go right ahead. If you're a hater of Israel, this is not the show for you. I have some statistics, not statistics, but historical dates that I want to share with you. Not that it makes any difference because people don't really care. But in 1600, before Christ, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the forefathers of the Jewish people and bearers of the faith in the one and true God, settled in the land of Israel. In 1200 before Christ, Moses took us out of Egypt. In 1200 to 1100 before Christ, the tribes of Israel settled in the land of Israel. It was called Judea back then. In 1020 before Christ, the kingdom of Israel is established with Saul as the first king. In 1000 before Christ, Jerusalem becomes the capital of the kingdom of Israel under King David. Yes, you heard me right. 1000 before Christ, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. In 960 before Christ, the first temple, the national and spiritual center of the people of Israel, is built in Jerusalem by King Solomon. 722 to 720 before Christ, the kingdom of Israel is located in the northern land of Israel and is conquered by Assyria. 10 tribes go into exile. I don't need to read you any more dates. You get the point. And guess what? They've been trying to kick us out of the land ever since. But I got news for you. God gave us that land. It's ours. And we're not going anywhere. I'm going to teach you a word in Hebrew. Lo. Lo means no. Lo. We're not leaving our land. Lo. We are not surrendering. Lo. We are not going anywhere. If you're Jewish, wake up. Whether you're secular, whether you identify as Jewish or not, if you have a Jewish name, they're coming for you. Raise your voice. Don't be afraid. Last Sunday, my husband and I attended a rally to support Israel. It was scorching hot in the middle of the San Fernando Valley. But we did. We went. We raised our voice because it's important. This is literally a battle between good and evil. So choose your side. Where do you want to be when God calls you to the other side? What do you have to explain to him? You better not have to explain why you turned your back on him and his people and his commandments. And now I would like to introduce you to my very, very special guest this week, Mr. Joseph Samuels. I am honored and blessed to know you and your beautiful wife, and I am extremely grateful that you accepted my invitation to be on this very special edition of the Edie Adler Show. He's a Holocaust survivor, so who best to tell you about the horrors that the Jewish people have endured since the beginning. Welcome to the Edie Adler Show. I'm honored to have you.
Thank you so much, Edie, for the so clear introduction of how the Jewish people are facing and what could be and how we defend ourselves. Thank you again for being there.
Thank you. I could never even come close to what you have done for our people throughout your life. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But why don't you tell people about your experiences, your story, being a Holocaust survivor? So maybe some of them will open up their eyes and their heart and try to understand what we have been going through and people like you throughout history. And history is repeating itself, unfortunately. Tell us about your experience, please.
Thank you so much again, Edie. Not too many people know about the the extent of pro-Nazis Holocaust, not only in Europe, but what happened to the Jews in the Arab land. Of course, I don't compare of what happened to us to the our brethren and sisters in that faced in the Holocaust, but we had our own share. I was born in Baghdad, Iraq in 1930. My Arabic name is Yusuf, and my mother tongue is Arabic. I was born in the old city, the Jewish quarter of the old city of Baghdad, where streets were narrow and twisted and unpaved. I had a happy childhood, and I was believing that Baghdad was my home and Iraq was my country. That dream was totally shattered when I was 10 years old. That in 1941, a pro Nazi coup deposed the government, the king fled, and it began the era of the pro Nazi influence on the population. The daily newspapers published articles about how the Jews are not national, not Arab nationals. They are they are uh, sucking the blood of the Muslims. They are not interested being nationals. And by the way, the Jews in Iraq were there since the year 586 BC, a
Mm.
thousand years before Islam conquered that area. We are we were we are the indigenous people who lived in Iraq. But that was nothing when the pro-Nazi coup in Baghdad happened. The pro-Nazi coup was instigated by the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who fled Palestine in 1936 after the Peel Commission was suggesting to partition of Palestine to Arab and Jewish state. So he created the riots, and the British was trying to capture him, and he fled, and he was welcomed to come in Baghdad in Iraq.
I should we should clarify, just so that people understand, that Palestine was a name given to Judea by the Romans because they wanted to erase the name of Judea, the name of the Jews. Palestine is not. Palestinians were just given. They took that name after the Second War. There were no Palestinians, and the Palestinians that people identify as Palestinian were actually Jewish people. So I just want to make that clear so that people don't think, oh, wait, yeah, they went in there and they divided. No, they
Precise,
the Romans changed our name.
precisely. Actually, when the British won First World War and aided the Arab helped them to defeat the Ottoman Empire, they mapped that area into partition to Jordan, and they called the other area Palestine. They brought that name, as you mentioned, from the 2,000 years earlier from the Romans. So everybody was living in that area, Jew, Arab, Muslim, Armenian, Christian, whoever, was called Palestine. And they all carried a Palestinian passport, and the currency was Palestinian pound that they created. So your note is very well taken. Back to the story in Baghdad. So after 2 months of the pro-Nazi propaganda, and of course Radio Baghdad daily announced that the Jews were arrested as traitors. After 2 months, the British forces arrived at the outskirts of Baghdad, and uh, we were lucky that at that time in 1941, in June 1941, the world was the free world were facing annihilation. Hitler conquered of all, nearly overrun all of Europe. His army, uh, headed by General Rommel, occupied North Africa, arrived 70 miles from Cairo, and only the British stood up, and uh, and the one person, Churchill, the Prime Minister Churchill, who remained to fight Hitler. So the British, were lucky for the Jewish community that England, if the British forces find important to occupy uh, Iraq because of the oil and the route to India. So after the coup fled, when the British arrived, mob went into the to Jewish homes and businesses, looted everything, and murdered men and children, gang raped women, and there was no resistance and no fighting back. I was 10 years old and I was totally traumatized. My father was a merchant, textile merchant. Who always praised his Muslim customers as decent. Then my brother, older brother, 20 years old, he had Muslim friends. So I grew up believing that this is our home and our country. But then, after hearing what happened to the Farhud, I was confused. Then I heard stories of Muslim men stood up in front of the Jewish homes with knives and daggers and guns and risking their life to protect the Jews. Some took some Jews to their home to protect them and took the injured to the doctors. I was totally confused. So I asked my father to explain what is happening. So he said, "Son, there are good Muslims and bad Muslims, good Jews and bad Jews, good Christians and bad Christians, and you must not judge people as a group. You must judge each person individually for their action." So that was the best lesson that it remained with in my life.
Very wise words. Your father would have liked my father. My father was
Oh,
very
thank you.
wise too.
Thank you. So after the British came in and shot uh, few of the writers, it was quieter. I just want to add just the first day of the Farhud, my 16 years old brother, 6 years older than I was, went to visit. We had no telephones. The radio back that was silent, and he went to visit my uncles in the old city, and he found that the doors were broken and the house was empty. And then he went back on the main street, Al Rashid Street, and he found that mobs were dragging Jewish passengers from the minibuses, robbing them and slaughter them. And he saw the piles of the body on the street. So when he came back, I forgot to mention that we moved from the old city a year earlier to a house near the Tigris River. So the mobs was on their way to come to us, but luckily the British entered the second day and stopped them. So when my brother came in to tell us about what's going on, we were all traumatized. During the 2 months of the pro-Nazi government, I was sleepless. I cried to sleep. I didn't know what was happening, why we are singled out, why they called us bad people or infidels or traitors. But and when my brother came in, we locked our doors. We enforced it with a heavy furniture. And as a 10 years old, I carries water to the roofs with oil to boil, just in case of the mobs come to us, and we can pour it on them, that we can delay the breaking of our home. Fortunately, while we heard the mobs coming, the British arrived and dispersed them. So uh, then I usually have a PowerPoint to show how the mass grave where the Jews were buried, and what happened to us.
That's so
So
sad.
after the British came in, things went quiet, and then all began again to erupt on November 29, 1947, when the United Nations approved the partition of Palestine to a Jewish and Arab state. Demonstration in the streets erupted against the partition, and we, as a high school 17, we had to go with them and scream death to the Zionists, otherwise they will turn against us. We are afraid that a second Farhud will happen, but luckily we were there was very few skirmishes. But in Syria, in Aleppo, the mobs went into the Jewish quarter, burnt 4 synagogues, an orphanage, and murdered as estimated about 75 Jews. We were praying that the Arab, they will start, a Palestinian will start a new country and live side by side to us. But all the calls in Iraq and other countries calling for the destruction of Israel, refusing to start a country, a Palestinian country. So then in 1948, of course, we know 5 Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, attack Israel at its infancy, not because they fight about land, not about the unfairness of the partition, but to eliminate the state of the Jews from there. We in Iraq, the Jews in Arab land, whether we in Iraq and in other part of the world, in Syria, Jordan, and North Africa, we are praying they should start a country. And we didn't know if they're going to win, there'll probably be a second Holocaust. If they're going to lose, what will happen to us? And that's exactly what happened. Luckily, Israel survived, but we began in Iraq and other Arab countries facing new discrimination, anti-Semitism, arrest, torture, that in Baghdad uh, finally culminated by the execution of one of the most prominent Jews in Iraq, Shafiq Adas, and he was publicly hanged in September 23rd of 1948. I graduated the same year from high school and was hoping to come to the United States to study. I dreamt to be a nuclear physicist, and I was hoping that I can meet Einstein and study under him. But being a Jew, the Iraqi government refused to give me what's called an exit visa. This is very rarely known. What's the meaning of this? Although you get a visa and a passport, they will have to give you a special permit to leave, like what happened in the communist country during the communist era. So instead, when I saw all what's going on with the arrest and torture, I was afraid that I am next after a few of my friends were arrested. So I decided to smuggle out of Iraq. So in December of 1949, at the age of 19, I smuggled with my younger brother in a small riverboat by 2 Muslim smugglers who created a false area covered by hay, and the boat was moved by rowing and punting. And uh, I described that in my book, how we couldn't make it so easily. But then we arrived to Iran. From at that time, Iran was very friendly with Israel under the leadership of the Shah. And From there, I stayed 2 months helping other smuggled Jews to Iraq, to Iran, to help them, to help them that they go to Israel.
What happened
And
to your family?
my family was later was left Iraq after the after Iraqi government permit them in 1951 officially to leave, which I'll come back in a minute. Then as I continue with my story, I arrived to Israel on March 2nd. It was the first day of Purim, and that was the happiest day in my life. I walked without fear. I talked without fear. I slept without fear. But I also became a homeless, penniless refugee, stood up with a tin plate, begging for food. I slept on a steel bed in a tent anchored in the sand, and it was with a straw mattress, and it was very difficult. But in 2 weeks, I decided, to leave the refugee camp, and that's what when I speak with my PowerPoint, I show that I'm a former refugee. I didn't identify myself as a refugee. It was only part of my life, like I was a swimmer or a waiter or an insurance salesman. And then after that, I joined the Israeli Defense Force, and I was appointed sent to the Navy. And 3 years after I finished my service, I went to hoping to go to study. I went to Canada, to Montreal to study, but being I have no special talent, I have no money, and the weather and the English, I decided to leave my education and hope one day I get married and my kids will be educated. And that's what happened. I got married, and my kids studied. I have two PhDs and one MD. And uh, in 1978, after 22 years living in Montreal, I decided to come to the United States. And since then, I live in Santa Monica, California, and this for the last 46 years. And I'm grateful that I myself and my family to become an American, and I believe that's what is my home and my country. And I still believe that Israel is my spiritual home, and I am concerned about the safety and welfare of the state of Israel. I know Israel, as you mentioned, faced wars continuously from 1948, 56, 67, 82, etc., etc. And all these war, it's not about taking land, but to annihilation of the Jewish people. Regretfully, as I said, I have some nice friends, some Arab, they don't agree with it, but the terrorists, the Hamas, and now Iran, of course, the head of the snake that sent all this money to all these different areas the Gaza, or the Hezbollah, now the Yemen, the Houthis, and now Iraq under the tutorship of Iran, and had one goal to eliminate the state of Israel. But I do believe that the Jewish people survived all the empires that conquered them, the Roman, the Greek, the Assyrian, the Babylonian, and they all they came in and filled the world with big noises, but the Jewish people still alive. We're
We're
still
still here.
here.
We're not going anywhere. And I
We
want to I want to hear about your book also.
in 2020.
You know, before I'm sorry, I you look a little bit dark.
Oh,
I want people to see you
oh, it's
clearly.
dark. It's darker here. So maybe I'll put the light in just one moment. Oh, God.
I'm sorry for the interruption, but I just want everybody to be able to see him clearly. because what he's saying is very, very important, and the whole world should hear his story. But
Thank you. Is that
it's
better?
good to see him too. Much better. Thank you.
I thank you. So I didn't talk or share my story for 5 decades with my anybody, including my own family. But in 2007, 2010, I began to join the memoir class at Santa Monica Emeritus, and when I wrote about my escape, I cried all the way, and those were tears of bittersweet tears that released the trauma that I faced. And I continue, and in 2020, at the age of 90, I published my book, Beyond the Rivers of Babylon, that available in Amazon on ebook and audio. And in 2021, I wrote an article commemorating the Farhud, the 80th anniversary of the Farhud in Iraq, and was published in the Wall Street Journal. And when the mobs came after the Jews of Baghdad. And in 2024, I translated my book to Arabic. It's called Wida'an li Bilad al-Rafidain, and was published in Iraq for the Arab world to read. And also in 2024, I completed a screenplay and hope one that will be made into a movie.
That's amazing. That's awesome. How did you manage to get your book published in an Arab country?
In
How did
Iraq.
you?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. As I said, when I grew up, even in my teenager, I believed that they are good Muslims, and I had many good friends, and I still believe that. So when I wanted to translate the book, of course, my mother tongue is Arabic, but I didn't speak Arabic on a daily basis. So I need somebody to help me. So we find through the internet a translator, a Muslim in Iraq, that helped me to translate the book. Of course, when he translated, I edited and corrected back. It took us about 3 years to do that. So, and through him, I found a publisher, another friendly publisher in Baghdad, that published the book in Arabic, and he sent me a
Wow.
picture of the book.
Wow.
So this is briefly the story of my life, and I hope many people will will watch and listen how I became more resilient and hopeful in my life, and I didn't get stuck with being a refugee,
Or a
because
victim.
that is a sign of being a victim, full with hate and revenge, to try to to when I became a refugee, I had to answer one of two questions: who did it to me, or where do I go from here? If I answer who did it to me, I'll see myself as a victim, and again full of hate. But I answered the question, where do I go from here? And that's my story, and the story of nearly 1 million Jews who once lived in Arab land and Iran and other Muslim countries, that all they fled the persecution, anti Semitism, and they all became refugees. 600,000 of them went to Israel, and the rest was spread all over the world, in Europe, in America, and South America. But all had one way to look at life: where do I go from here? Like nearly the 140 million refugees during the 20th century, all of them found their home. We don't hear of them. Unfortunately, our brethren that I grew up with, some Arabs, they still feel refugees, and and they became terrorists under the leadership of Hamas and other leadership. Thank God for Israel killing Nasrallah, who people don't know how much the Iranian people celebrated the killing of Nasrallah and the other that Israel killed the other terrorists of Hamas, and they hope that this will be next to Khomeini. And I hope the Iranian people will and stand up to this. They live in terrible situation in Iran with inflation of 45% and poverty. And one day I hope by soon they can uproot the leadership and there'll be peace in the world.
I hope so. You are an example to everyone. It would be so easy for you to be bitter, to be angry, to shut yourself off to the world. And instead, you choose life like we're instructed to do. Choose life. And you've done that. And you're an example. I'm amazed every time I talk to you. I'm amazed at how wonderful a person you are, even though you went through so much. You show gratitude and you show forgiveness. And that's not easy to do, especially when you've gone through so much pain and heartache as you have. And I'm proud of you and I'm grateful that my husband and I know you and know your beautiful wife. She's awesome, by the way. She's so beautiful. I want to be like her when I grow up.
This December, I will be celebrating my 94th birthday. And not only that, but I am in a situation that I'm the best I ever dreamt in my life. I have everything more than I hoped and dreamed and dreamt. I have my beautiful three children and five grandchildren. They all shower us with love. And that's where I am right now in Idlewild with my daughter's home with my wife, and my son came from Vancouver to visit us. So we are
Yeah.
so blessed, looking for the future with hope and resiliency, facing the unpredictable events in life that everybody faces, and learn how to face it and look up to the future. See, where can I go from here? That is the answer of a good life. And thank you.
Go ahead. Tell us again the name of your book.
Beyond the Rivers of Babylon.
Available on Amazon.
Amazon on ebook and audio.
I
Beyond the
hope
Rivers. Joseph
beyond
Samuels.
beyond the rivers of Jordan.
No, Beyond the Rivers of Babylon.
Babylon. I'm sorry. I
That's
don't
where
know.
I
I'm
grew
thinking
up,
Jordan.
called Babylon. Yeah.
Babylon. Yes. I hope people buy it. You have to read this, people. Please buy it, borrow it, give it as a gift, but please read it. You need to hear the story. You need to get all the details so that you understand why we have to have Israel. Without Israel, the Jewish people are doomed. We would have nowhere to go. We would have no one to stand up for us. And yes, there are good and bad people all over the world. But as they say, for evil to win, all we need is for good people to do or say nothing. Please, people, wake up. Please stand up, raise your voices, and do the right thing, even if it means losing friends or family. Do the right thing and stand up for the good against the evil. I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for being my very, very special guest on this special edition of the Edie J. Adler Show. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
May God
Edie.
bless you and inscribe you and your beautiful wife in the book of life for a year of goodness, sweetness, health, and happiness.
Thank you, Edie. I'm honored for you inviting me, and it's my pleasure and duty to share my story.
Thank you so much. And my friends, once again, thank you for tuning in to the Edie J. Adler Show. I'll see you next week, God willing. And remember to always, always be grateful. I'm Edie J. Adler.
You're listening to The Edie J. Adler Show, only on LA Talk Radio.